Welcome to the Brain Observer, where we search the scriptures daily to see whether or not these things are true. We, uh, we want to deal with the question, does God really exist? We're living in a time when there are many people raised in evangelical homes that are falling away from the faith, they're deconstructing, and the surrounding culture is becoming increasingly secularized. Um, People try to argue that the separation of church and state means separation from freedom from religion, and the result is that we're seeing a tremendous amount of social chaos as a result. So that raises a very, very good question. How do we know that God actually exists? And skeptics claim that there is no evidence for the existence of God. You can't see him, you can't touch him, you can't hear his voice, you can't hear the sound of him. So how do we know that God actually exists? And of course, I think part of the problem is that they try to explain the account for the existence of the physical world through like the theory of evolution, and we'll discuss that in a future video somewhere else. But I would argue that the question is, how do we know that God then really exists? And I would argue that the proof of the existence of God is literally as plain as the nose on your face. When you get up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror, ask yourself this question: why is your face symmetrical? Why is nearly every human being's face symmetrical? Why are the faces of animals all symmetrical? How, do you mean to tell me that all happened purely by accident? And the answer is no.
Professor P.Z. Myers, you are a developmental biologist, and I've invited you to talk about this because I've heard this comment or this complaint or criticism or whatever you would call it from a number of creationists, and I can kind of get where they're coming from. They don't understand that there are kind of biological rules to the way that things develop, and so they're just imagining that in order for one half of your face to look like the other half of your face, there has to be a mind controlling that. They don't realize that these are developmental aspects of being a bilaterally symmetrical animal. Can you help people understand that?
Well, I saw that video, and I had been thinking about this today, and when I saw the video, I realized, no, I am vastly overqualified for this. What he's saying is he's set up this bizarre dichotomy where it's either God or it's entirely random where your nose ends up on your face, according to biologists. And that's not the way it works at all. Yeah, there's a huge literature on symmetry and how you acquire symmetry, how symmetry is maintained. Uh, there's a whole bunch of molecular biology behind it that, for instance, we know that BMP4 is an important molecule in specifying dorsal ventral, and this is kind of ventral dorsal, but anyway, yeah. So you've got all these molecules that are defining it, and those molecules are triggered by symmetry breaking events in their environment. That, for instance, for humans, what seems to be the key event early in development is implantation in the endometrium. So you got this little ball of cells that's radially symmetrical, basically, has no orientation, nothing's yet differentiated except for the stuff that's going to become extra-aromatic tissues. And when it implants in the endometrium, it's receiving signals that tell us which end is up. So it's not random. It's very specific. It's reading a set of signals from the organism, from its mother, that tells it how to do things. And similarly, we look in other organisms, fruit flies. What you've got is maternal effect genes that are expressed in the mother and are packed into an oval-shaped egg on one end. So that's going to become the front end of the animal. We can go way back if we look at something like an alga, like fucus. So you get fucus. It's not going to make a nose. What's going to happen is it starts out as a single cell, and it's floating in the ocean, and sunlight shines down on one side and it's in shadow on the other. And that triggers an ion flux across the membrane that is used to create the dorsal part of the embryo and the ventral part. Nothing random, nothing magical. Don't need a god unless you think the sun is a god. So yeah, it's an amazing misconception that fellow has.
Yeah, one of my friends that asked me this question many years ago, he unfortunately succumbed to creationism, and one of the arguments that he had was that he couldn't understand why you would have like a caterpillar with a certain number of legs on the other one side, and then there's a matching number of legs on the other side. And I tried to show him that while plants may be asymmetrical, porifera is, sponges and such are asymmetrical. We have this particular type of life for which we have a front and back, top and bottom, and left and right, and this is developmental at the core. This is how, and that there are other animals that are similar but different. You mentioned radial symmetry, right? So we and I read this and I featured it in one of my videos. You did this diagram on the evolution of cnidarians and so forth about how the symmetry changes between the different types of orientation for the type of symmetry, I guess. And then there was one that I wanted to bring up that you might not even know about, Proarticulata, which is a Precambrian life form, already extinct before the Cambrian explosion. That's important. That's but this was a phyla that in their development that it does the mirror thing, but in alternating. So it's alternating isomers.
Very
It
cool.
creates one organism in ribbed fashion like this, but left, right, left, right, left, right as it goes, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean these really are very common questions in developmental biology. I mean, your friend didn't have to go to caterpillars. You could just simply ask, how come our right and left arms are the same length for most of us? You may have noticed that they are identical in length roughly, but there's no signaling between your left and right arms during development. It's not like the left arm is saying hurry up and catch up. It's just we set aside a specific number of cells with a specific pattern of divisions and a specific rate of growth, and we turn them loose, and you end up with arms that come out pretty much the same length, which is kind of impressive, actually, that you can grow this structure that's over the 10 or 20 years it takes to fully grow out, and they come out roughly the same.
All right. I don't know how to follow that up. I just wanted to thank you for helping out with that, because I've heard people use that kind of complaint before, and I don't know a way to explain it to them. That I don't know, when you need there to be a little tiny band of musicians inside the radio, then that's just what you're going to imagine. It doesn't matter what.
Yes. Well, all I can say is keep throwing me those softballs. Those are easy.
Thank you much, sir.
Sure.